So we've got a lot of different woods. Some of it is interesting. Some of it is just more attractive. We have historical woods, and then the woods of interest, like for instance, a Jim Beam whiskey barrel. It's not historical. It's while it is attractive, most folks are going to be more interested in for the story,
right,
than for the look.
What kind of wood are those made out of?
They're all oak.
That's right.
Right, oak. Regardless of the brand, the whiskey barrel is going to be oak.
Always oak. And how easy is oak to work with?
Oak's a piece of cake to work with. It cuts easily. Mm-hmm. It's not real frail, and so it's a piece of cake to work with.
Right, cool.
Yeah, and when we weather wood, the majority of the woods we weather is the oak, because it can be weathered and still hold together well.
Very cool. What's your favorite wood to work with?
My favorite wood to work with isn't here, but in this section, but it's walnut. It's almost always beautiful. It never really frail, or it doesn't tear apart hardly. It's a joy to work with.
Cool. So, okay, let's say I'm looking at one of these, the
Right.
Bolivian rosewood.
Right.
How many rings?
We can get
100
rings out of that piece of wood.
Amazing.
So our costs are not in the materials we use so much as it's the artisan labor.
Interesting. That makes sense. Okay, so here's a question I've always had. Your rings, obviously a circle. How do we start with this and get a circle out of it? Like, do you carve it out? How does that happen? I don't understand.
We actually shape plies, and we make a little plywood tube from the plies. This is an example.
Okay.
And then we fashion the tube into a ring.
That's amazing. Can you show me what that looks
Absolutely. So to make our little plywood tube, for example, here's an example of historical rifle stock that we've cut down. This is 1903.
Oh yeah, I saw those up there.
Right, 1903 Springfield, which is the weapons that were issued during World War I, for example. And we would simply take that and we would place it in an old-fashioned vise, and we use an old-fashioned planer to cut plies of wood,
and that's something that you could do with the machine.
Oh, we
you
could
guys
use
choose to do by hand.
We could use it with the machine, but the human hand's a lot more accurate.
Right.
The machine. We've tried machines; it didn't work. But we get these pretty little curly cues. This is walnut, which is what the rifle stock's made out of.
Right.
Right. And so they come out like this. They're beautiful.
Whoa.
And then we make little plywood tubes out of those to fashion the rings.
Okay, that's really okay. So what would the next, after you've got one, how many of those little curly cues have you said? Make
7 or 8.
7 or 8. What does one of those look like in a raw form?
Let's go take a look.
Okay, so we've got the 7 or 8 curly cue plies that you were talking about. What happens next?
Well, these get handed off to my daughter Phoebe, who will make the little plywood tube. And then the plywood tube gets handed off to the crafters to make, so she can walk you through that process.
So I start out with taking what we call a mandrel, which lines up with the ring size that we need for the order. And then I'll take the wood shavings and basically wrap them around, if there's a liner, it's a different wood, around bunches of times, about 6 plies typically.
So that would be the layer that would touch somebody's fingers.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we use a series of glue, wrap them around to a base, put that in the box, cut it down the next day so it's the right millimeter, make sure there's no holes in it, it's a solid piece of wood.
Wow. Very cool.
We make a little plywood tube.
Okay. I see now. So that's 7 or 8 of those And that's the walnut that we were.
Right, and then they're fashioned to whatever size that the customer needs. So, and then they will be fashioned by the crafter from here. This is what gets handed off to the crafter. Crafter takes the little plywood tube and fashions the ring out of it with whatever inlay the customers ask us to include.
Very nice. Do we have anything that looks like this the next step down the line?
Here we actually have the walnut on the outside. The customer chose to have a holly liner on the inside.
That's beautiful.
Right.
I saw those blocks out in the front room there.
Right. And then they chose to have a center turquoise with rose gold flanking on either side, centered. So that's what they look like when they're finished.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Really cool.